It wasn't until the following week that Tony realized he could fly. He knew it was coming, of course. Well, hoped it was coming. Hell, the last week had been one wild ride, so it was inevitable. He dared to suggest that the most glorious, most enjoyable of all superpowers would hit sooner or later. Typically, of course, it had been later, the last of his powers to manifest, but who was complaining? Tony could fly. Game over. Sure, he could freeze a can of beer with a glance and light the gas hob on his stove with a flick of the wrist. He could chop firewood up at his old man's lodge in the hills with his bare hands. He also thought maybe that if the skin of his hand was like the steel blade of an axe, perhaps he was bulletproof as well. That would sure be handy in a city as dangerous as San Ventura, but hardly the kind of superpower you could just test, unless you were the kind of guy who got a kick out of Russian roulette. A city as dangerous as San Ventura. The Shining City, right? Yeah, right. Tony shifted his weight, trying, failing, to get more comfortable in the awkward squat in which he found himself on a warm Thursday morning. He wobbled, momentarily losing his center of gravity, but couldn't risk moving his hands from the back of his head. But under the black, empty gaze of the gun barrel that very quickly appeared in his face, he found his balance again and remained quite still. Unspeaking, but apparently satisfied, the gunslinger pulled the barrel of his Kalashnikov upwards and walked on, the wet creak of his leather combat boots loud from Tony's low position near the floor of the bank. Tony really hated Thursdays, and didn't this one just take the cake? With the thug's back moving away, Tony glanced around. A few desperate eyes were on him, wide and white, furious that he'd attracted the attention of one of the raiders, but relieved in a shaky kind of way that he hadn't gotten them all shot. Tony wasn't sure if an apologetic smile was appropriate, so decided not to bother and returned his attention to the cheap carpet tiles in front of him. A distraction came anyway as the leader of the robbers threw a few more heated words out of the window at the cops gathered in the street outside. Robbers? The word stuck in Tony's mind. Fuck that. Robbers? What the fuck kind of robbers walk around with AK-47s or whatever the hell their guns were? They were big guns, automatic assault rifles, with the distinctive curved magazines that only weapons bought on the Kazakhstani black market had. As far as Tony was concerned, the name AK-47 applied to all that kind of shit. It was a bad scene, which meant they weren't bank robbers. Bank robbers wore black jeans and balaclavas, or maybe pantyhose, over their heads anyway. Bank robbers ran in, maybe 3 or 4, waving handguns and shouting at everyone to get the fuck down and fill this fucking bag, bitch, and nobody fucking move! And a few kicks and punches later, out the door leaving old ladies to cry and bank clerks to comfort each other while the police carefully crunch on the scattered candy of broken glass spilled from what's left of the front doors. Machine guns, combat boots, hell, combat uniforms weren't the purview of bank robbers. These guys were pros. No, Tony thought. Even more than that. Organized, disciplined, efficient. There had been no shouting, no running. A dozen men, black-booted, black-suited, each identical and anonymous behind something approaching a paintball mask crossed with a respirator. They came in silence and calmly took up what must have been pre-assigned positions before their leader clicked something on the side of his mask and told everyone to crouch on the ground with their hands on their heads. 2 of his men broke off and brought the bank manager from his back office, and the leader began politely asking a series of questions. It was surreal, dreamlike, which at first gave an illusion of safety. It was only when the cramps started to bite that reality began to crystallize. So, not robbers, professionals. Soldiers, masked and uniformed, in San Ventura. Soldiers? No. Henchmen. Which meant... shit. The one day I go to the bank. The one day I go to the bank in like a whole year, and I walk right into a classic piece of San Ventura villainy.